A black waitress is ridiculed for her scars until a veteran is shocked to recognize her unit tattoo. "Look, Freddy Krueger came to work today," Davidson shouted, slamming his hand on the tabline, making the plates rattle. "Hey, monster, bring more coffee over here, but be careful not to spill it with Toe's burnt hands." The cruel laughter echoed through Ray's diner like an emergency siren. All eyes turned to Keisha, who held the coffee pot with perfectly steady hands, despite whiskers that spread from her fingers until they disappeared under the sleeve of her white uniform shirt. Keisha Johnson was 34 years old and had faced much worse than the insults of Davidson and his crew of mediocre executives who showed up every Tuesday to brighten her day. What they didn't know was that every cruel word only fed something inside her that grew in silence, a strength they could never understand. "I bet it was enough fire in the ghetto," whispered Brett, Davidson's accountant, loud enough for her to hear. "Or maybe she was trying to cook crack and blew it up." Davidson lawed even louder. "Or maybe her boyfriend did it to her. You know how domestic violence is in that community." Keisha approached the table with measured steps, her posture straight, contrasting with her expectation of seeing her slump under the weight of humiliation. When she reached the table, she poured the coffee with surgical precision, every movement calculated and controlled. "Anything else, gentlemen?" she asked in a voice so calm that Davidson frowned, confused by the lack of reaction he expected. "Yeah, an explanation." Davidson leaned forward, his small eyes gleaming with malice. "Tell us how you got that. Was it an accident, or did Simeon teach you a lesson?" For a split second, something flashed across Keisha's face. It wasn't fear. It wasn't shame. It was the look of someone who had stared death in the face and decided it would have to wait. But Davidson was too busy admiring his own cruelty to notice. "Work," she replied simply, turning to leave. "What kind of work leaves someone like that?" Brett insisted, his voice heavy with contempt. "Nightclub secured a prostitute." "Careful," Keisha interrupted, turning sly to face Brett. There was something in the way she said that one word that made the air at the table grow heavier. "Some stories are more dangerous to tell than you can imagine." Davidson lawed again, but this time it sounded a little forced. "Oh, look, monsters trying to scare us? What are you going to do? Burn us like they burned you?" What none of them realized was that as they spoke, Keisha memorized every face, every name mentioned in their previous conversions, every detail about their lives, that they unconsciously reveal lettering these weekly sessions of cruelty. Her military mind worked like an information processing machine, cataloging everything for a purpose they couldn't even dream of. Across their restaurant, a man in his 40s watched the scene with growing discomfort. James Wright had arrived a few minutes earlier and chosen a table in the back, hoping to enjoy a quiet cup of coffee during his cross-country trip. But the verbal brutality he was witnessing was turning his stomach. Something about Keisha's posture, the way she maintained her composure under heavy fire, awakened a distant memory in James. There was something familiar about that serenity under pressure, that unnatural calm that only existed in people who had been in places where death was a real possibility. If you're enjoying history, don't forget to subscribe to that channel. Keisha muttered under her breath as she wiped down a nearby table, a phrase that had become her personal mantra for maintaining her sanity. "Because you haven't seen anything this monster is capable of yet." There, under the fluorescent lights of a cheap Texas diner, while enduring humiliations that would break most people, Keisha held a secret that could completely rewrite the narrative of those arrogant men. Because some of the most underestimated people are exactly the ones who hold the most powerful secrets. Davidson wasn't satisfied with Keisha's evasive answer. In fact, her calmness only fueled his need to break the serenity that bothered him so deeply. There was something about her posture that challenged his sense of superiority, and that was unacceptable. "Work," Davidson repeated, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "What kind of work, sweetheart? Because from what I see here, you serve coffee and cleanables. Not exactly high-risk professions." Brett laughed, encouraged his boss's persistence. "Maybe she worked at a barbecue joint and got burned, or in a dry cleaners with chemicals. You know, jobs for people like her." Keisha stopped cleaning the table next to them, her movements becoming more deliberate. When she turned to face them again, James Wright noticed something the others could in single quotes tsee. A subtle shift in the way she distributed her body weight, as if she were preparing for something. "People like me?" Kesha asked, her voice maintaining the same calm tone, but with a new layer of something that made Davidson hesitate for a second. "Yeah, no," Davidson recovered quickly. "People will work with their hands, manual labor, nothing that requires too much brain power." It was at that moment that James noticed the detail that made his heart race. When Kesha leaned forward slightly to pick up a fallen napkin, the sleeve of her shirt rode up a few inches, revealing not only the scars that ran down her arm, but also the faded edge of a tattoo. It was only a few partial letters, but to someone who had served in the army, those marks weren't mystical. "Interesting," Kesha muttered, more to herself than Davidson. "Manual labor. That's an interesting way to describe carrying wounded soldiers 3 meters under enemy fire." Davidson blinked, confused. "What did you say?" "Nothing," Kesha replied, returning to her neutral tone. "Never mind. Do you want the bill, or are you going to stand here all day making comments about my appearance?" The sudden change in tone caught Davidson off guard, but it also angered him even more. He wasn't used to being dismissed, especially by some he considered to be below him in the social hierarchy. "Listen here, you little prick." Davidson rose from his scare, his voice rising. "You're going to show us the respect we deserve. We're paying customers and you're just all what?" Kesha interrupted, turning to face him completely. For the first time since he had arrived, she made direct eye contact with Davidson, and something in her gaze made him taken involuntarily back. James Wright watched the scene with growing tension. There was something about the way Kesha stood. Few as she held her hands open at her sides that brought back memories of military training. She wasn't just defending her dignity. She was assessing threats and calculating responses. "An employee," Davidson finished, trying to regain his bravado. "An employee should know their place, my place," Kesha repeated, slowly as if savoring the words. "You're right. I should know my place. The problem is, you have no idea what my real place is." The tension in their restaurant was palpable now. Other customers had stopped eating, some discreetly reaching for their phones, others simply watching the confrontation, and the restaurant manager, Tony, emerged from the kitchen with a worried expression, but stopped when he saw Kesha's stance. Tony had known Kesha for 2 years and had never seen her like this. Always calm, always professional, always swallowing insults with a dignity secretly admired. But now there was something different in the air, as if a storm was brewing right before his eyes. "You know what?" Davidson continued, clearly drunk on his own power. "I bet you didn't even finish high school. I bet those scars are from some street fight or something. People like you always get into trouble." That's when something changed in Kesha's eyes. James saw it happen, an almost imperceptible etrantos, but unmistakable tatos who knew the signs. It was the look of someone who had decided that the time for backing down was over. "Street fighting," Kesha murmured, a humorless smile playing on her lips. "It's funny how you always assume the worst. It never occurs to you that maybe, just maybe, these marks come from something noble." Davidson laughed loudly. "Noble? Look at you. You work in a road sitter resort. What could possibly be noble about your life?" Kesha walked slowly toward their table, her steps measured and deliberate. When she stopped beside Davidson's chair, she leaned in slightly, her voice lowering to a whisper that only he could hear. "The difference between you and me," she said. "You judge people by what you see on the surface. I judge them by what I know they are capable of doing when no one's looking." Davidson felt a chill run down his spine. There was something in her voice, a cold certainty that made all his self-preservation instincts scream. But his pride was greater than his bitter judgment. "Are you threatening?" he asked, trying to sound indignant, but his voice came out a little higher than he intended. "Threatening?" Kesha straightened up, returning to her professional tone. "Of course not. Just pointing out that sometimes people completely underestimate who they're dealing with, and when they realize their mistake, it's usually too late to do anything about it." Each new humiliation only strengthened something inside her that her oppressors couldn't see. A silent strength fueled by thievery injustice they tried to impose on her. What those privileged men didn't was that every act of contempt was writing their own sentence of defeat, line by line. Cruel word by cruel word. James Wright could no longer remain silent. During his 15 years of military service, he had learned to recognize veterans even when they tried to hide it. It was something in their posture, the way they assessed threats, their emotional control under pressure. And Kesha had all of these signs. When Davidson sat back down, clearly satisfied with his display of power, James stood up and walked over to the counter. He ordered more coffee from the waiter, but his eyes were fixed on Kesha, who had resumed her duties with an almost supernatural calm. "Excuse me," James said quietly as she passed by him. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" Kesha sized him up quickly. "Veteran, probably Army or Marines." Respectful posture, "Sure, but quickly. I still have tablesto weight on." "That tattoo on your arm," James whispered. "First Infantry Division. Big red one." Kesha's body tensed for a split second. "Did you serve in Marines?" "2 tours in Afghanistan, and you've clearly seen action, too." James glanced discreetly at Davidson, who wasteling a loud joke to Brett. "These idiots have no idea who they're messing with, do they?" Kesha allowed a small smile to touch her lips. "Not a clue. Combat medic?" James asked, noticing the precision with which she handled objection, the way she instinctively checked for injuries when someone got hurt. "Combat trauma specialist. 3 tours in Iraq, and you're right about them not knowing who they're messing with." Kesha looked directly at James, but it's not time for them to find out yet. Meanwhile, Davidson had decided that his public humiliation of Kesha was only just beginning. He took out his phone and started recording a video. "Everyone," he said loudly enough for the entire restaurant to hear, "I want you to see this. This is Monster who serves you coffee here. Just look at that burned face." Kesha slowly turned around, her eyes meeting the camera on the phone, but instead of the embarrassment Evans expected, she just smiled. A cold smile that made James shiver because he recognized that expression. It was the smile of someone who had decided that the time for retaliation had come. "Keep recording," she said calmly. "I'm sure you'll want to save this for posterity." Davidson laughed, misreading her calmness. "See, she even likes the tension. I bet she's used to being filmed. She probably has an OnlyFans account for people with a deformity." That's when James saw something that confirmed all his suspicions. For just a second, Kesha sized Davidson up with a look of a soldier calculating trajectory and points of impact. It wasn't anger. It was pure tactical analysis. "You know," Kesha said, walking over to Davidson's desk, "you're right about me being used to being filmed. I actually have quite a bit of experience with cameras." Davidson kept filming, excited by the attention. "Oh, yeah. Tell more about this experience." "Well," Kesha pretended to think, "I've been filmed receiving military medals, medals for saving lives under enemy fire, medals for bravery in combat." Second of filming. The lie was so convincing that Davidson hesitated for a second, but then laughed even louder. "Sure. And I'm General Washington. Look at you, military man." But some customers began to look more closely. Kesha's posture, the way she talked about medals with a specificity that didn't seem made up. James realized she was planting seeds of doubt. "Keep recording," Kesha repeated. "By the way, what's your full name? So when this video goes viral, people will know who's behind this masterpiece." "Davidson Mitchell from Mitchell and Associates," he replied proudly. "You can look it upon the internet. Successful company. Successful looking guy filming a failed employee. Mitchell and Associates," Kesha repeated, memorizing it. "Interesting. And what do you guys do?" "Business consulting. We help companies get rid of affable employees." Davidson looked at her meaningfully. "Employees who don't fit the company image." James watched Kesha process this information with the efficiency of a military computer. He could almost see the gears turning in her head, cataloging not only the names and the company, but probably already thinking of strategies. "Tony," Kesha called to the manager, who had returned to the kitchen to avoid confrontation. "Can you come here for a second?" Tony appeared reluctantly. "Kesha, please. We don't want any trouble." "There won't be any trouble," she said calmly. "I just want you to witness that Davidson Mitchell of Mitchell and Associates is recording this video voluntarily using my name and image and making specific comments about my physical appearance." Tony blinked, confused. "Oh, okay. Thanks." And James, she turned to the veteran. Thank you for identifying yourself. Maybe we can talk more after my shift. Davidson was starting to get annoyed by Kesha's lack of emotional reaction. Hey, stop pretending you're in control. You're just a burned-out waitress that nobody wants around. You're right, Kesha agreed calmly. I'm just a waitress, someone you clearly consider invisible, harmless. Someone who goes unnoticed while observing and learning things. Something in her tone made Davidson stop recording for a moment. What kind of things? Oh, you'd be surprised what an invisible person can hear during business conversations, especially when those conversations happen weekly at the same table for months on end. Kesha smiled again. But go ahead with your video. I'm sure your clients will love to see how you treat people you consider inferior. It was then that Davidson realized he might have said too much during all those Tuesdays. Details about questionable contracts, dubious practices, clients he had helped fire employees for discriminatory reasons, all said out loud in front of a mere waitress he considered too irrelevant to pose any threat. James saw the exact moment when Davidson's arrogance began to crack, replaced by a hint of concern. And he also saw the moment when Kesha decided she had gathered enough information for now. Well, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure as always, she said, tucking the pen into her apron pocket. See you next Tuesday. Or maybe not. As she walked away, James realized that had just witnessed the first moves of a military campaign. Kesha wasn't just a veteran trying to survive in the civilian world. She was a seasoned strategist who had just turned months of humiliation into ammunition. For a word of it and didn't even know he declared. For a moment, when she accepted the humiliations without fighting back, everyone thought they had broken her spirit. But those who know true military strength know that it grows precisely insolence, fueled by the patience and precision of those who have learned that the best revenge is the kind the enemy never sees coming. Davidson's phone began to ring insistently. It was Michael Stevens, his biggest corporate tech client. Davidson answered with a smug smile, keeping the camera on. Davidson, you need to explain a few things urgently. Stevens' voice sounded tense. I've just received some very disturbing information about your company. What are you talking about, Michael? Davidson laughed, looking at Kesha as if she were part of the joke about the methods you use to fire employees, using questionable criteria. That's when Kesha approached the table. Stevens, isn't that right? Your company has been mentioned several times here. Something about cleaning up the payroll of undesirable elements were the exact words. Davidson paused. How did you? 3 months ago, you explained in detail how you helped Stevens fire black employees using restructuring as an excuse. Kesha continued calmly. You said the trick is to create retroactive reference documentation. They can never prove discrimination. That's a lie. Davidson shouted. Lie. Kesha smiled. Tony, can you bring me my phone? The one with the recording app I've been using for the last 6 months. The silence was deafening. Davidson felt the floor disappear beneath his feet. In Texas, only one party needs to consent to recordings. Kesha replied calmly. Every Tuesday for 6 months. I recorded every admission of discriminatory pact you made, while thinking you were talking to a mere waitress. Tani returned with the phone. Kesha played a recording and Davidson's voice echoed through the restaurant. The secret is never to put it on paper that it's a boot race. You document other things. Laterals, productivity, cultural fit. Davidson reached for the phone, but James stepped in between them. I wouldn't do that. 6 months off confessions, Kesha continued. Client names, specific tactics, amounts paid, all perfectly audible. Davidson's phone rang again. It was his wife. Davidson, what the hell is going on? My sister just sent me a video on Instagram where you were humiliating a war veteran. Kesha raised an eyebrow. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention. I posted that video you recorded on your own social media, with some details about my military background that you never bothered to find out. Davidson opened Instagram with trembling hands. The video already had thousands of views. The description read, Mitchell and Associates CO humiliates decorated war veteran. Sergeant Kesha Johnson served 3 years in Iraq and saved dozens of American lives. No, this will ruin everything, Davidson muttered. There's more, Kesha said, showing him a folder on her phone. Over the past 3 months, I've investigated every aspect of Mitchell and Associates. questionable encounters, unreported payments, connections to companies under federal investigation. She stood up, commanding absolute respect. The recordings have already been sent to the Department of Labor, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commissions, and 3 offices specializing in discrimination. Davidson tried to protest, but Keisha continued relentlessly. The viral video will ensure that everyone knows who you really are. Your clients are already being contacted by civil rights activists. The phone exploded with calls. Each ring was another client canceling contracts. Why? Davidson asked, his voice broken. Why didn't you say who you were from the start? Kesha stared at him with unshakable dignity. Because men like you need to learn that respect shouldn't depend on uniforms. It should be automatic, basic, human. James stepped forward and extended his hand. Sergeant Johnson, it's been an honor to witness this. As Davidson and Brett left in complete despair, Kesha turned to the other customers. What about you? 6 months watching this happen. How many other people have you seen humiliated and chosen to do nothing? As their revelations piled up and the masks fell away, one thing became crystal clear. Davidson had picked the wrong person to humiliate at the wrong time for the wrong reasons. And now Kesha's true strength was being revealed through the systematic justice. She had orchestrated with the patience of a war strategist. 6 months after that transformative day at Waitress diner, Kesha Johnson was no longer just a waitress trying to survive insolence. The story of her life had spread nationally, turning her into a respected spokesperson for veterans' rights and victims of workplace discrimination. The diner itself had become a pilgrimage site for veterans from across the country. Tony, the manager, had created a hero's wall on the main wall, where Kesha's photo in military uniform took pride of place alongside dozens of other local veterans who finally felt comfortable sharing their stories. It's funny, Kesha remarked to James during one of her weekly visits. I spent 3 years hiding who I was, and now I can't hide it even if I wanted to. James smiled, watching the complete transformation of the environment. Sometimes we need to be broken to discover how strong we really are. Davidson Mitchell, on the other hand, was living a nightmare that seemed to have no end. Mitchell & Associates had closed its doors after losing all of its major clients. The viral video had been viewed by more than 10 million people, making his name synonymous with discrimination and corporate incompetence. His wife had filed for divorce, taking with her half of what remained of their assets after the court settlements. He called me last week, Kesha told James, serving coffee to edible of veterans who had driven to 100 just to meet her, apologizing, begging to take the recordings off the internet. And what did you say? That some lessons need to be permanent to be effective. The federal investigation triggered by Kesha's recordings had revealed a scheme of discrimination far larger than anyone had imagined. 12 companies that had been clients of Mitchell & Associates were now facing lawsuits for discriminatory practices, and Davidson was cooperating with the authorities in a desperate attempt to reduce his own sentence. Brett, the accountant, had lost his professionalishness and was working at a convenience store across town every time someone recognized him from the viral video. He would lower his head and change aisles, carrying the weight of the shame his cruel words had created. What struck Kesha most was how the community had changed. Customers who had once pretended not to see the humiliation now made a point of greeting her, some even apologizing for their own omission. The old lady who always sat at the corner table had become one of Kesha's most vocal defenders, telling anyone who would listen about our local hero. "You know what I've learned," Kesha said during an interview for a national podcast on veterans' rights, "that respect will be something you have to earn through medals or uniforms. It should be automatic, universal, human." James had moved to the city permanently, opening a small consulting business for veterans transitioning to civilian life. He and Kesha had developed a strong professional partnership, helping other former military members navigate the challenges of the corporate world. The ironic thing James reflected during any of their conversations is that David tried to use his discrimination to feel superior, but he ended up revealing his own moral inferiority to the whole world. Kesha's story had inspired legislative changes in 3 states, including new protections for veterans against workplace discrimination. She had testified before congressional comment, her calm but powerful words echoing through the halls of power in Washington. Tony had promoted Kesha to assistant manager, but she divided her time between the diner and her new job as a consultant to organizations seeking to improve their diversity and inclusion policies. Ironically, many of the companies that sought her out, most were former clients of Mitchell and Associates, desperate to repair their damaged reputations. The best revenge, Kesha said during a speech at a veterans convention, is not to destroy those who hurt you. It's to build something greater than they could ever imagine, and to do it with such class that they are forced to respect the very thing they tried to destroy. Davidson occasionally passed through town, driving a used car instead of the BMW he used to flaunt. On one such trip, he stopped at the diner, not to cause a trouble, but in a pathetic attempt to talk to Kesha about misunderstandings, second chances. Kesha greeted him with the same professional courtesy she had always shown him, serving him coffee and taking his order without a change in her voice or demeanor. When he tried to apologize again, she simply said, Mitchell, what happened between us was not a misunderstanding. It was a revelation of character, yours and mine. The transformation had been complete. The woman who once accepted humiliation in silence was now sought after by companies, universities, and government organizations to share her experience on leadership, resilience, and justice. Her scars, once a source of shame and ridicule, have become symbols of courage and sacrifice that inspired thousands. If this story of transformation and justice has touched your heart, Kesha said during her most recent television interview, remember that we all have the power to choose how we respond to injustice. We can bow down to it, or we can use our inner strength to rewrite our own narrative. The lesson was clear. Davidson tried to destroy Kesha, but he ended up destroying himself. Ka learned that true revenge isn't about repaying the harm done to you. It's about achieving a level of success your enemies could never imagine, and doing so with a dignity that forces them to confront their own moral mediocrity.